This will be a replay of a PokerStars 10+1. This is not Pete's actual username, but like most guys, he didn't want his true username on the video, and that's cool. So I just switched it to Pete NGA. And let's take a look at how we can maximize Pete's game. So one theme that you guys will know from all of my videos, or even just playing one of these games, is that late blind play, when the blinds get high and the stacks get shared, is when the biggest money decisions come into play, the decisions that most affect your equity for the game. So I want to talk mostly about that, but pre-flop low blind play and just low blind play in general is still important. Okay, that 8s is a good fold. So a couple of things here. Now I've looked at several of Pete's games, and the most important low blind principle that I want to instill is that if you're playing after the flop, okay, maybe you check in the big blind and there's not a lot of action. If the guy checks once or twice after the flop and your hand doesn't have a lot of showdown value, you really need to go ahead and make a bet to take the pot. That is a time when, particularly if you've got position, and the guy's saying to you, look, I'm telling you through my betting that I have no interest in being part of this hand, then you need to take him at his word and throw out a little bet. Okay, that doesn't mean you play a large pot. That just means that you take him at his word and you throw out a little bet. So we'll look at a few specific examples of that. And the most important thing to take a little sneak peek at high blinds is knowing when you can make a profitable shove, knowing when you gotta fold. Okay, maybe you have a good hand in your late position, but due to the stack sizes and number of players left, you can't profitably shove. And of course, the similar principle with calling. Okay, when can you make a value call? When are you just spewing away chips, etc.? And the way to do that is, there's some good common principles that we'll look at, and also just by software. And we're also going to look at the software. And one thing that Pete mentioned to me in the normal pre-coaching that we do, and let me mention here, this is a clear fold. So good job, Pete. Well played. Is that he doesn't know when to shove and when to call all the time, and nobody does. Okay, even really good players will get this wrong. But the best way to improve on that is, again, looking at the software a lot. And I think a lot of times, particularly for guys who aren't too used to it yet, it can look really intimidating because there are a lot of variables, and that's something Pete pointed out. Okay, there are a lot of things to adjust, and you've got to put people in ranges, which can be tough. But once you get used to it, it's really not so bad, all right? So we're going to take a lot of look at software, and more specifically, the biggest... Did Pete enter that one? No, okay. I was going to say, no 4-6 suited. Okay, this ain't a deep stack cash game. So the most important thing there is going to be small blind shoves. When everyone folds doing the small blind, and like I've said a lot in some of my recent videos, you've got to be pretty laggy in those times and know when to make a pretty wide shove. Now, I gotta interrupt myself to say, Pete, what were you thinking, man? Now, Ace-10, the only time you can really play this in mid-blind play is when you're opening in late position. So I would say the hijack would be the earliest you could open that, and under the gun +1 is way too early. The problem is that too often you're up against dominated aces, ace-jack or whatever, and rarely you're big favorite. And also, you don't want to be taking this post-flop line, so at the flop, even though this is a situation you don't want to be in, once you're there, pretty much when this guy bets out, you've got 2 overcards, you probably just want to fold. If you do stay in, you should raise. But just calling and hoping to hit an overcard isn't too good. Pete mentioned, though, that most guys, like when I coach people, they send me the best hand histories they've ever played. And it's like hand number 1, they get aces, and they knock out 3 guys. A good example of this is the recent video I made with my brother. and with just about anybody. And Pete said that the ones he sent me aren't necessarily examples of good playing on his part, and that's smart. Okay, if you got an opportunity for free coaching, I mean, you don't always want to send in times when everything's going really well. So I think that was a really good idea on his part to send games when he made some not great choices, so we had more material to look at. So this isn't a great play because one, he's drawn to the ass end. He's got no overcards, and if called, obviously he's way behind. So you don't want to semi-bluff all in a situation like that with two active opponents. But maybe that six will do it. No. Okay. So let's hope he rebounds here. And if it's folded to him on the small blind, this is a definite shove. So good, he makes that shove, and that's correct, even though he gets called probably by a better hand. That's correct with 6 blinds to shove a naked king. So, and the pair of fours is going to win it. So even if the math behind that isn't, you don't necessarily know the math, that's really good instinct, shoving that king for 6 blinds. Anyway, like I was saying, I mean, the first rule in these Sngos basically is not to bluff and just to stick to value. And then you get these crazy guys like me telling you to shove any 2 in a lot of these situations when everyone folds to in the small blind and to a lesser extent from the button and earlier positions. And really that's just the math of the game. And really, I mean, it comes down to expected value, right? Because generally guys need some kind of a hand to call, even if they're kind of loose passive. So let's say the guy is going to fold, maybe like 2/3 of the time. And in Holdem, it's pretty rare you're going to enter a flop as worse than a 2-1 underdog. The classic example, of course, is Ace King versus 7 Deuce. The 7 Deuce isn't more than a 2-1 dog. So if like 2/3 of the time you're going to get a fold and steal the blinds, which are, get substantial pretty quick, and a third of the remaining time when you're called, you're going to win the showdown, that's not so bad, okay? That equation kind of works in your favor. So again, we're going to look at a lot of examples of that. And so far, with the exception of the Ace-10 hand, this is pretty much solid low blind play. Good fold, of course. So this would be another shove if everyone had folded to Pete. As is, I wouldn't even complete here because, I'd be a lot more inclined to complete with a hand like 7-8 suited than King-8 offsuit, just because King-8 offsuit, you're playing to make a top pair, and often that won't be the best top pair. So here with 7 blinds or so, 7 or 8 blinds, if everyone had folded, it would be pretty narrow. It would depend a lot on these guys' ranges. But one thing I think, particularly for the lower stakes games, is you will get called wider in general, and I would not actually make that shove with Ace Deuce. Ace King, very good reshove. No point just calling, you just want to put all your chips in the center. Pair of aces should take this, and does. Awesome. We're back in business. Okay, that's another clear fold, which Pete makes correctly. Pete, you gotta make some mistakes, buddy. I'm not gonna have much to talk about here. Alright. So the question is, what's next, right? So after we get through this video, I've given Pete some homework. And Pete, you better do this homework, man. I'm gonna smack your ass, alright? So I've told Pete that he's got to do some exercises related to Wizard, and that's a pretty standard thing for guys that I coach. That's a pretty good fold. Pretty standard thing for guys that I coach, which is that, if you're really serious about this, you've got to be willing to put in some time. Okay, not like major research project time, but, willing to review your games. And I think that's pretty universal for any poker variation. And with Sngos, the biggest thing is with software. And I've given Pete a lot of ways to do that. I think that's one thing that'll really improve his game. in this particular hand, you know what, folding isn't so bad. Okay, it's a little tight, but it works. And one reason that it works is because this is really resteal territory, so particularly against guys that are more aggressive. Now we see that these particular players are kind of passive, okay? They're not raising a lot before the flop. So this guy, for instance, is entering nearly a third of hands, but hasn't raised once before the flop. Now, like again, these stack sizes are kind of in the resteal range, which is like, 11 to 17 blinds or something. And against more aggressive opponents, this would be a more clear fold. Here, I wouldn't really mind a raise to like 350, kind of a small ball enter. Probably calling a raise from the shorter stack, folding with other guys. But it's not a big mistake to just lay that down. So the most cut and dry decisions are going to be shove, fold, call decisions during high blinds. And those are the ones where, you're able to say pretty concretely, this is a mistake. Good job here. And that kind of thing, which is more concrete. And I think that's what most guys want. It's certainly what I want. Like, what's the right answer? And this one, considering that this guy is fairly loose passive, I wouldn't mind restealing all in for around 9 blinds. Not even restealing, raising all in with a pretty good suited Broadway hand. And we'll look at the math of that one at Wizard after this. But checking isn't so bad, because this is a hand that can connect well with the flop, and bang, Pete! Oh, you nailed this one with a royal flush draw to boot. So I think a pretty good line here is to let this guy bet once, okay, check, call a bet, and then try to build the pot at the turn. You could check raise, but I like the initial check, okay? I don't think just leading out is good, because this guy might say, hey, my ace-7 with no clubs isn't looking so good on this board. And, it doesn't matter a lot here. You can either pull the trigger now and check raise, or you can build at the turn. So now when this guy's pretty much all in, Pete just pulls the trigger for the remaining 500 chips or whatever, and that's good. And a nice value bet on the river for the remaining 300 chips, which is really good. Okay, I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but a lot of guys fail to hit these really obvious value situations, and eking out any chips you can is really important. So that's a really good hand. And Pete, awesome, man. Nice job. So here I would shove this Jack 10. You know what, this guy, I don't think at a low stakes you can just assume guys are going to call super narrow. But Jack 10 for under 10 blinds is a shove. So that's another one where I'll assume that Wizard is going to say that, and we will absolutely find out. But a very definitive one is this pot should not be entered, okay? Now the thing is here, if you raise to 600, if this guy resteals, you've got to fold. But what if this guy resteals, alright? He's going to be restealing to like 1600, and then you'd have a pot of like close to 2k, costing you 1,000 to call, so you're getting about 2 to 1. That's a terrible situation to be in. 5 queen has no value post flop if it's called. So raising to 600 is the worst play here. The best is obviously folding. If you don't want to fold, you can just shove. That would be a minus equity shove, but really don't like a 3BB raise. So I guess the moral there is don't junk raise to 3BB as a steal raise in a sit and go. For the most part. Like when you're in the bubble, sometimes things get a little different if you have a really good read. But you pretty much need a concrete reason to do that. So, like I said, no, like I didn't say, like I was gonna say, we need to get, what I want to do is have a video where Pete and I are doing this together. I could go to Georgia, or he should come to DC, man. That's Pete. You got to come to DC so we can chill and do this. But we could even do it like over Skype, so because I think people want to hear from the man himself. This is a good raise. You'd have to fold to an all-in resteal here, but Ace-10 is definitely strong enough to value raise. So nice job. But yeah, Pete, I mean, you and I, man, we're gonna do this, right? So we definitely have to hook that up. Because I really want this guy to succeed, alright? I mean, like, even if I didn't, which would be pretty messed up since, I'm involved with like a coaching site, but, he's just, Pete has a great presence on the forums. Everybody loves this guy on the forums with good reason. Okay, he's got really good posts. He's clearly really wants to learn this game really good. And he's just a fun guy, so I absolutely want him to do good. And we're going to do whatever that takes. So be prepared, Pete. You ain't getting off this one easy. This is a good all-in raise, by the way. I mean, raising to 600. Usually, guys will realize they're all in, but you might just want to go ahead and make it 800 or an actual all-in. But the point is that he raised for around 5 blinds from the small blind with an ace, which is absolutely correct. Oh yeah, so then Pete has this thread, like my poker vacation, and his wife and kids go out of town, and he's planning to play poker. And I mean that's really cool. But what I loved about it was it got like 80 replies, and everybody's like, "Pete, how's your vacation going? Pete, what are you up to?" And it's just really cool that Pete has resonated so well with the forum members and myself, and I know everybody really wants him to do great. So I really mean that. I really want Pete to do really good. Okay, after that hallmark moment, I do like the ace-7 raise. A lot of times the raise a little smaller, but 600 leaves you with a pretty clear decision afterward, because if Buckeyes or two outers, reseals you can call, and you have to fold to Kedley. And if you do get a random call, which is certainly possible, to get a smooth call and hit a flop, particularly in a low-stakes game, then a mid-suited ace plays well. Unlike weak face card hands. Something like King Deuce. Wow, this guy's like all in, 22 blinds. What does he have? He probably has junk. I mean, I want to say ace, king, or tens, but he's probably got like sixes, tens. Okay, well, if you were going to shove for 22 blinds, tens isn't such a bad hand to do it with. And what does this guy have? Kings? Okay. Kings is a legitimate call, I'd say. Man, this guy won't let up. 3K. Stiff price of doing business. Man, I was playing at Ben Maxim's house the other weekend. We were playing with this guy. It was a 1-2 cash game, and he was actually a pretty good player. I mean, clearly he had some decent knowledge of cash, but his default raise was to like 18, and I don't know. I mean, maybe there was something behind that because this guy didn't seem like an idiot, but I didn't really know what he was doing. That's the type of raise my friend Ari would say. That's a Tropicana raise. The type of random raise you see in live play. What do I know about live cash? That's actually a really fun game though because there are a lot of people that a lot of good stories being told. And this one guy, he told a story that was really funny, even though I didn't understand it all. He's like, "Well, we were playing at this 5-10 game, and I'll tell you what, this game was so loose, he made it 2,000 to go before the flop. He had King Deuce. He didn't even know he had that." And I thought it was hilarious. We all burst into laughter. And I realized afterward I didn't know what he was talking about, but the way he told it was just really funny. Okay, back to Pete. So Pete, I'm gonna go ahead and raise this, and I know that's really tough to do when you're actually in the hand and you've got junk. But the thing is here is that when this guy folds, okay, you win over 400, which is about half what you're risking to pick up the pot, and he's not going to call with any two, even if the odds are such that he should call extremely wide. I mean, he will call wide, but most guys here are going to discard their 2-3 offsuit and their junk hands. And when you do get called, you're not going to be worse than 2-1 dog. So again, we'll look at this hand, but those are the types of steals that generally you should be making, unless you know the guy's going to be calling with pretty much any two cards. Another thing Pete mentioned is, how do you know these ranges? On Wizard, you've got to give it some input. How do you know the guy's going to be calling 5% or shoving 20% or whatever? And really, it's just experience. So you think to yourself, okay, this guy's kind of loose passive. I'm shoving on him. Is he going to call with any pocket pair? Is he going to call with ace deuce? And you have a little slider, and you just get something that looks right. Nobody's perfect at it. You can't be perfect at it. So you just take a good guess, and bang. And that's the thing with, pretty much any type of poker and applying math to poker. It's all based on assumptions. There are no 100% corrects. Well, sometimes there are, like making an any two call when you're getting 10 to 1. But pretty much when you're doing modeling or trying to reach conclusions based on math, you need to plug in assumptions. They're just about never going to be perfect. And that's cool. You just get better and better at them, and that's a really big part of the process of getting better. Okay, this is a definitive any two shove. And another thing also here is that we're dealing with around 8 blind stacks even without the antes. So with 125 and antes, this is kind of like ante-less blinds of 150, 300 because the starting pot's the same, only he's not getting quite as good odds as if that were the case. So King 9, okay, well, maybe P knew something I didn't know. The guy had aces, whatever, but the King 9 is a definite shove. And the 600, yeah, that's good. And obviously you call a resteal. Another thing about Singos is, again, as I've said, they're fairly mechanical. A lot of these hands don't involve nearly the creativity that deep stack cash does. And the type of principle is that the guys are going to have to give Jade. So, I'd like this to be as complicated as possible just so I could brag more and be like, yeah, I'm destroying these super tough games. But I mean, a lot of it's just the fact that I've got the math down really good. And I follow, the most winning style. And, I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying this because it's the type of thing that really can be taught, I think, a lot more readily than other poker games. And I really think that if Pete puts a lot into this, he can become a very good Sngman player. Pretty much, if you're good at numbers and you like poker, you have kind of aggressive tendencies at the table, you can really learn how to play these games very well. Particularly if you don't, necessarily want to beat the toughest games. You just want to make a nice side income that's very doable. Okay, you've got to call this, Pete. You've got to, because, alright, check it out. You're getting between 3 to 2 and 2 to 1, and you've got a strong hand. And this guy, I mean, look, he's not super aggressive for sure, but he is on the button with a short stack, and guys do realize that they have to begin opening up a little there. And this guy could have, even if he's got like ace 10, you're not a huge dog, you're like 42%. He could certainly have hands that you dominate, like queen 10 or king jack. So getting pretty good odds, this is a hand that you've got to call for value. Unless he's shoving a super narrow range. This is another any two card shove. People really like to show. It's funny. Okay, I like this bet. And it's slightly on the loose side, but Kedley limps in, and we flop middle pair. Now, would be a real mistake would be being willing to play a very large pot here. But with 625 on the table, Pete's betting a bit over half the pot with a hand that could very well be good, middle pair hand in a heads up situation. So that's fine. Now, the time I would pester him would be if he checked, Kedley checked, the turn came a blank, and Pete checked again. That would be a mandatory bet. But betting there is fine. This is another situation when I would advise Pete to shove. So, like I've said, by far the biggest thing, and definitely the biggest way I'm going to improve his game, is having him really solidify his late position and particular small blind open shoves, and knowing when you can do that with any two cards. What do I know about Pete? Well, I know he likes to play the mandolin, which is cool. I dabble on the piano, so I kind of have that musical blood in me, one might say. And Pete lives in Georgia. He's married, so we're ready to play the bachelor game. Another any two shove. So we need to get him on a video. Yeah, that's great, buddy. It's 7-8, really good. And just find some stuff out about him. The mystery man. Now this shove kind of surprises me because we've been tighter with our small blind shoves, and all of a sudden we're shoving for 8 big blinds with a weak jack high hand, and this hand will absolutely not show profit shoving. So it worked out, and it is high blind aggressive, which is good. But this particular shove is not a profitable one. How do I know that? Because I've played a lot with the software that we're going to be looking at soon. This is also not a profitable shove. I don't know if Pete's going to shove it. But you will not show profit doing that. It works out though. So we move along. And you can, if Cincy Kid had shoved, that would not be a call. Because on the bubble, you've got to shove wide and call narrow. So finally he pulls the trigger. Nice job, man. And he can shove pretty wide on the button. But with 9-4, I don't think I would shove. You definitely could against guys, regular players who really know the math and wouldn't call off lightly. But I don't have that kind of faith in some of these random low stakes guys. So I like that fold unless there's a real read to the contrary. Okay, now in this hand, I like the resale all in. I guess it depends more on what guys are seeing at these games right now, because I've got a lot of feedback that they're changing and guys are calling wider. But against most players, I would re-raise all in there with a pocket pair, since Buckeyes is the shorter stack and this is the bubble. And if called, it sucks, but two sold up okay, and you're not necessarily the bubble boy. And here I don't know. This one is not so bad because Buckeyes could raise all in, and then you'd have to fold after Kedley called. And I don't like just raising all in, since this guy, we did see him high blind limp once earlier, but for the most part he has pretty tight aggressive stats, or at least aggressive, and he is limping from early position, so I would want a little more value before shoving there, since that's a kind of uncharacteristic play. Let's see if I'm right, okay? I don't remember what this guy has. I did watch this, but let's see if he's got trash or if he's got something decent. Nines, okay, well, yeah. That's not good enough to trap with, but decent hand. Doesn't work out for him, though. So Cincy Kid attacks this high blind limp, and let's see, maybe he's read my book, maybe he's picked up a monster. Oh, 9-7. Okay, that's a pretty loose attack. And he's up against jacks. Man. But in this particular situation, I don't believe Buckeyes has high blind limp before. So I don't think he would have been able to put that HBO note on. So you probably want a little more value than that. And it does work out though for Pete and GA, who now makes a correct shove with 10 blinds and pocket eights. You don't want to make a smaller raise, that's a good shove. And now this hand should be a shove. Okay, because Kedley I don't think is necessarily trapping. He did high blind limp once earlier. There was not a trap. His limp with the nines, wasn't trapping with a monster. And we're not super deep. And be shoving for around 2,000 with about 900 in the pot and a decent hand. So I would just shove all in right now. But once the flop comes, Pete only flops a gut shot. Kedley bets out big. It's a definite fold. And okay, here's one thing. This should be a raise all in. This shouldn't be dicking around here with small raises. And the problem is that if you raise to 1,200 and this guy decides to re-steal, you pretty much have to call, but you really don't want to gamble right now. And the reason for that is because Kedley is a shorter stack, and you don't want to risk going out third, so you'd rather just have this guy fold. And you don't want him to have a hand like pocket threes or ace 8 or whatever, and decide, well, I've got a decent hand, he could fold if I re-steal. You just want to have this guy fold, so I would go ahead and raise, if not all in, to something that's blatantly pot committing, like 3,200. So the important thing is that he opens the pot, but it should be a flat-out all-in raise right then. These non-turbos really last. And okay, so this is a little loose, but Buckeyes has limped the last. Well, he did limp with the jacks though, so I don't know. I think the combination of him having trapped once with a limp and the stacks being kind of deep and this hand playing well after the flop, I would just take a flop. Okay, if the effective stacks were under 10 blinds, I'd be a lot more inclined to raise on immediately. Here I'd probably take the flop. However, it is aggressive and in the right spirit, and it does work out. And that's a good fold. Don't want to shove total junk for 11 blinds. Now the situation we're in right now, it's another good fold. This is kind of a tough one, regardless of buy-in, when you've got 3 guys left, and they're all equal stacked, with like 10 to 12 10 to 12 blinds and chips. Okay, because there aren't a lot of profitable shoving opportunities, and usually you have a lot of very close decisions. And so far, I think Pete's been handling it very well, and this is definitely a good shove. Another time not to mess around with small raises, which Pete does not do. Good fold. Okay, well this is a definite shove. So let me just pose the question. We're going to look at this on Wizard, but what hands roughly are profitable to shove here? Any ace, any pocket pair, any mid-king, pretty much any suited king, any 2 Broadway cards, 9-10 suited. So certainly not any 2 cards, but any decent hand, like an ace or pocket pair, you should definitely go ahead and shove. And these guys, well, certainly not tight, have not been making ridiculous calls or taking hands way too far during high blind play. Well, I said that, and now we'll see if I'm totally disproved here, but okay. Ace Queen and 7-6. So pretty ridiculous to get all in with 2 overcards after the flop and these deeper stacks. But that works out very well for us, regardless of who won, since now Buckeyes is effectively blinded out, and we're pretty much assured of getting at least second place. Okay, in this situation, you've got to shove. The reason you've got to shove is because if you do, this guy's almost certainly going to fold, assuming you've got a hand, and you win like over 1,000 chips as a guaranteed side pot, even if this guy wins the main pot. So that's too many chips to just let go. This guy's almost certainly just calling with the idea of implicit collusion to eliminate Buckeyes, and I'd really shove. Now, some guys object that you'll get a note then saying shoves very wide, stuff like that, and it's true. Okay, you just have to take into account the meta effects of this. So if you shove, guys will think you shove wide, which you do, and then you have to stick a little more to value shoving for a little bit afterward. But this is a pretty good opportunity that I wouldn't normally just shove. And sure enough, that would have won us about 1,000 chips. Oh, and a flop straight. Nice beat. Okay, now we're down to heads up. Now heads up, so much of it depends on how wide these guys are calling. So, with effective stacks of around 8 blinds, and this guy who doesn't look to be calling super wide, I would go ahead and shove pretty much any 2. 6-3 suited, I would shove. Okay, that's got some showdown potential if called. And the race 1800 is a little problematic, because if Kedley does re-steal all in, you have a very tough situation, since you're getting very good odds, and yet it's real tough to call off another 3,000 chips with a 6 high. So you can make that an easier decision just by open shoving. Okay, good re-steal. No point seeing a flop there. 1800 plus on the table. And so one thing is that after a few hands, sometimes I'll limp once because these guys usually aren't expecting it. But a weak queen you can shove. So you could either fold, limp, make a small raise. Folding is fine. No, I don't like this call. You could stop and go here. So I believe Pete is going to check fold this flop. And that's a very bad line. You should never call a 3-blind raise cold and then check fold the flop and heads up with short stacks. So better lines here are to re-raise all in, to stop and go the flop, and stop and going would be a pretty good play here, since this is a flop very unlikely to connect with this guy. Okay, a lot of the times he's going to have a hand here like, King of Spades, 10 of Clubs, and he's not going to want to call off another 4,500 chips with 2 overcards when he could be drawing dead. So I would either 3-bet all in or stop and go, but I would not call and then fold to the flop. Okay, definite shove. And again, okay, this isn't the time to make 3-blind raises. Calling the re-steal is very clear, but just simplify your decision making. Don't give him a chance to re-raise with a hand like Ace-7. Just take the blinds and raise all in. Oh, what a flop! So we have a full house, which is going to beat second pair. Nice job, Pete. And let's take this mofo out, huh? Good fold there. This should be a shove. Again, so the reason I don't like these raises of 3 blinds is that if this guy re-steals, you've got a tough decision. Do you call getting really good odds even though you're almost certainly up against a much better hand? Do you lay it down? And this is a really baller play. I'm just, wow. So this guy raises to 1,800 with a starting stack of 4,300, then folds for another 2,500. I mean, this is like so aggressive and ballsy that I can't criticize it, even though I'm tempted to say that Kedley is almost never going to fold for another 2,500 after raising to 1,800. But King's not such a bad hand, and like I said before, it's a lot better to be over aggressive and play too many hands too aggressively than to wait for a strong hand when you're in short stack heads up play. Now, this situation, I would go ahead and shove, because if Kelly discards any part of his range, you're going to show a profit. And I like the check because he's, well, I would say almost certainly, with Kelly, I don't know, but most guys are called the remaining 2200, and this way you can see a flop. And when you hit trips, yeah, awesome. So really dumb limp by that guy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pull up Sngman101, and we're going to tell Pete exactly how to make these decisions optimally without a coach and analyze his games. Okay, I've pulled up Sngman101, and what we're going to do is look through these hands, and okay, when you have a yellow or green no mark, that doesn't necessarily mean you've made the correct play. You could have made a mistake after the flop. You could have, be in a situation where the ranges that Wizard is assigning are not applicable to your particular situation, but the red X's are the main ones to start with. And okay, this is the hand that I was talking about earlier. Was this? No, actually, I think this one was debatable, yeah. So let's see what Wizard had to say. And one thing about the pushing is that there is equity in checking as well. But it's true, okay? If you shove, you're probably going to win some chips. Now, the biggest thing here is, how do you know that open percent is 40 and call is 12? And I think this particular situation, when you have to give two ranges against maybe an unknown opponent, and many people, not just Pete, aren't going to really know how to do this, and you just have to kind of use some common sense. Let me make sure this is fitting in the window here. Okay, well, you guys can see the ranges. And the question is, what hands is he limping with, and then what hands is he calling with? Well, we don't think, like, by process of elimination, he's not going to be limping with every hand, right? He's not going to be limping with just premium hands. So, let's say he's limping with like any ace, any decent king, pretty much any pocket pair, and with this guy, maybe a bit wider, like up to king 8. Okay, now, why do I say king 8? I don't know for sure. I'm just throwing something out here, okay? Because a loose, low-stakes player, what is he limping with on the button? Well, we need some kind of a hand, not necessarily a premium hand, and I can't do any better than this. So I'm just going to assign it. Maybe it's a bit narrower, maybe it's a bit wider, but it's a reasonably good guess. Okay, then what percent is he calling with? Well, obviously it's going to be tighter. He's not going to want to call off his whole stack lightly, but I think he's going to do it with more than just ace-10. Okay, he's pretty loose, it's low stakes, so maybe a call with like up to king-queen. I don't know. That wide? I said it. Okay, sure. So, I think it'd actually be a little tighter than this, but I'll go with it. And based on this, it is a check. It's very close, but shoving does show a little equity difference. And no, did I tell him to shove? Well, whatever. So, see, that's the thing, all right? This one is one that's really close, and you can't really make a very big mistake, but this is how you go about the type of analysis, by plugging in ranges and doing all you can there. They're not going to be perfect, but this is how you begin analyzing these problems. And I think that if you're really experienced with these lower stakes games, you can probably refine the ranges a little more. So that's good. Okay, this is another one that, pardon me, I suggested that Pete shove. And again, it's real tough to shove with junk hands, but there's a lot of reading on the table. And the way I'm going to analyze this one is not what do I think he's calling with, but how wide could he be calling such that a shove is still plus equity. To do that, I go to Tools, Charts, and this pops up. Okay, if he is calling any less than top 65%, you show a profit. So, let's take a look at top 65. And is he going to call the rest of his stack off with hands like 8-6 offsuit, 10 deuce suited, and Jack 3 offsuit? My guess is no. No. Maybe some guys will, but my guess is no. And this is a situation when a lot of guys are going to be significantly narrower. Okay, maybe not super loose players, but a lot of players to encounter are going to need a decent hand, in which case you just show a pretty big profit. Okay? But if you guys are going to be calling like any 2 here, so a few guys are going to be one of these worst case situations, and I think that shoving there is definitely your best bet. The moral, when the blinds are big, and the guy's going to discard any part of his range. You want to go ahead and shove. Okay, the King 9 hand, I remember this was a small blind hand, and this one is definitively correct. So this is really a huge loss. Now again, converting to 10-man $100 buy-ins, okay, this would be a $12 loss at $100 buy-in. So if you wanted to make like a 10% ROI, you would have killed it just by not shoving here. And how wide can he be calling and you not show a profit? Well, even if he's calling 100%, you show a really big profit. Okay, the worst is when he's calling like 30%, and so this is a huge mistake. And I'm not saying this to rag on Pete, but if you want to improve your game, you need to start with the biggest mistakes, and not shoving a hand like King 9 with a huge starting pot from the small blind is a very big mistake. It's probably the biggest mistake of the game. So again, that's cool. You gotta learn from these things. And I know that everyone here watching this video, myself included, started off by making mistakes of this magnitude on a regular basis. Okay, this is another NE2 shove. And again, I think it's going to be pretty much a shove for a very wide range. Okay, he's got to be calling with well over the top 50% for this not to be a shove. And so then from there, okay, you just look at it. Oops. And you say, well, how often is this guy actually calling? And very few guys are going to be calling here with hands like 10-6, 9-7 suited. So pretty much this is a shove, and you would start, if you didn't, besides using tools charts, you could say, well, he's calling off the rest of his stack, so he's probably going to need at least like a mid-king or a suited queen, in which case you win $7 by shoving. We don't know his exact range, but that doesn't matter. We can get close, and close enough at least to know the correct play. So I'm not going to harp on Pete for every one of these small blind shoves. Suffice it to say that whenever in forward stream the small blind with 10 blinds or fewer, you need to shove very wide. Okay, 6-5. This is another small blind shove. Jack 5 button. Okay, so this is one where I said that you couldn't shove. And you can look at wizard's ranges. Off the top of my head, they look roughly correct. And you would need pocket fours, ace 8, ace 7 suited. I probably shove king queen there, but that range looks pretty much right. So definitely get used to what you can shove from the button. From the cutoff, another one where you need a stronger hand. So even king queen would be a definite fold here. And the reason why, king jack isn't such a bad hand. We're under 10 blinds deep, but it's on the bubble. If one of these guys calls you, he's usually going to have you dominated with at best a pocket pair, and you're racing, and often with, ace king, ace jack, king queen, and those hands will have you dominated. And when you lose here, you lose a ton of equity because you're one of the chip leaders on the bubble. So you pretty much need one of those strong hands Wizard's talking about, like a mid pocket pair or a solid ace. Okay, and see any others? Queen jack from the big. Oh, that was this one where he should shove. Okay, because again, you can look at the ranges, but for around 5 blinds deep, you should go ahead and shove there. That queen jack hand. And lastly, the king 3. Wizard didn't like that. That was the cowboy overshove. So that's cool though. I'm not gonna disparage high blind aggression. So Pete and GA, I know I speak for everyone here when I say that I'm really looking forward to watching you become a monster at the tables. Good luck, my friend, and we will definitely keep on doing this. All right.